Deep in the wet green lungs of Central America, where rivers appear like veins and the canopy hides centuries of secrets, a story has traveled from native whisper to conquistador myth, from fevered explorers' journals to satellite maps. They call it La Ciudad Blanca, the White City. Others call it the City of the Monkey God. For hundreds of years it has been at once legend and obsession. Some call it fantasy, others call it one of archaeology's greatest hiding places. Tonight we walk that thin line between myth and proof, following the maps, the people, the Lidar pulses that pierced the canopy, and the footprints of those who went searching. This is the story of a lost world that refused to stay hidden. Legends are the oldest kind of map. For the indigenous peoples of La Mosquitia, the Pesh, the Mosquito, the Tahuaca, the stories of a city of pale stone, a place of carved monuments and powerful animal spirits were part of oral memory. Spanish chroniclers and conquistadores of the 16th century picked up fragments, wrote them down, and sent them back to Europe as tantalizing tales of a wealthy inland city. Over time, the White City glowed bigger and stranger in the imagination of the outside world. In the 20th century, adventurers like F.A. Mitchell Hedges and Theodore Morde launched expeditions into the same jungle. They returned with rumors, a giant monkey god statue, caches, strange artifacts, and, just as often, with illness and frustration. Each claimed discovery fed the myth. Each failing deepened the mystery.
La Mosquitia is not a single place, but a region. Marshes, rainforest, mountains, and the Rio Plátano Biosphere Reserve. A world where terrain and disease have kept outsiders at bay. For communities who live there, the land is both resource and story. For outsiders, it is forbidding. The jungle is not a blank space to be conquered. It is an archive written in stone and soil. It is worth noting, archaeologists have long known that this region contains dozens, perhaps hundreds of archaeological sites, plazas, mounds, and earthworks, though only a fraction were scientifically recorded until the 21st century. The idea of a single white city, a cinematic lost metropolis, is likely an oversimplification of a far more complex ancient landscape. But the pattern of large settlements is real, and the evidence began to accumulate in a new way when technology changed the game.
For centuries, explorers hacked through vines, climbed hills, and followed rumor. In 2012, an airborne eye changed the rules. Lidar, light detection and ranging, is a simple idea. Shoot lasers from a plane and measure what returns. In a few passes over Mosquitia, Lidar pierced the leafy roof and revealed the ground beneath in astonishing detail. Where the eye saw only green, the instrument drew plazas, mounds, artificial terraces, and geometric earthworks, patterns no jungle grows by accident. The images stunned those who studied them. What looked like empty rainforest in photographs was revealed as a human-designed landscape with clusters of structures, large central plazas, and causeways. One set of LiDAR strips showed features comparable in scale to known pre-Columbian cities. The media, hungry for a single headline, latched onto the lost city. Archaeologists cautioned, LiDAR maps suggest sites. They do not prove ancient cities on their own. Ground truth matters. The LiDAR maps were followed by expeditions. In 2015, a multidisciplinary team, scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists, filmmakers, and Honduran collaborators penetrated a site identified by the Lidar. They walked the ground where lasers had shown plazas and mounds. What they found were imposing earthen pyramids, terraces, irrigation channels, and intact caches of carved stone offerings at the base of a central pyramid. These offerings, zoomorphic figures, carved stone metates, and other ritual objects, suggested a sophisticated regional center that had been abandoned perhaps 5 centuries earlier. Photographs of stone carvings and cachet arrangements circulated widely. National Geographic ran a documentary. A book by Douglas Preston popularized the expedition and its dramatic dangers: the heat, the swarms of biting flies, the ever-present risk of disease, and the thrill of discovery. Yet even as headlines celebrated the find, friction grew between the expedition's narrative and mainstream archaeologists, some of whom criticized the project's methods and the premature language of discovery. So what did the ground actually show? The team recorded plazas, house mounds, causeways, canals, and a central earthen pyramid. They documented hundreds of stone offerings in sealed contexts, offerings placed when the site was abandoned. The stylistic attributes of some carved stones suggested complex iconography: snakes, vultures, and animal forms with a regional flavor not easily slotted into any single known culture. Radiocarbon and contextual analyses have suggested occupational periods that could range across the late pre-classic to post-classic periods, a millennium of activity that requires careful, patient study to understand.
One of the most evocative images to come from the expedition was that of zoomorphic carved stones, some said to evoke a monkey deity. To outsiders, the monkey god image fed the legend's most romantic notes, but academically, such iconography needs cautious reading. Images of animals, jaguars, birds, serpents, and monkeys are common across Mesoamerican and Isthmo-Colombian traditions. The presence of such carvings suggests ritual practice and regional connections, but does not automatically authenticate the grander claims of riches or the exact identity of a white city. Still, to the people who walked away from those caches, the feeling was unmistakable. This place had been important to the people who built it.
With discovery came debate. Some archaeologists criticized the prominence of filmmakers and adventurers in leading public announcements, arguing that rigorous peer review, careful excavation records, and local collaboration should set the tone for such work. Others warned that sensational headlines could risk looting, illegal logging, and increased pressure on fragile reserves. Honduran archaeologists pointed out that their own long history of survey and knowledge was sidelined in popular retellings, a pattern with colonial echoes. At the same time, defenders of the Lidar and expedition work argued that technology had revealed a landscape of large, organized settlements where scholars had been blind before. The takeaway is not a single verdict, but a more complicated truth. The region likely contains multiple significant ancient sites, not one sine-perfect lost metropolis, and these sites demand careful multidisciplinary study in partnership with local communities. Beyond stones and lasers, the most important story is human. Indigenous and local communities still carry the memory of places, names, and sacred landscapes. For them, the White City is not just an archaeological prize. It is part of living cultural geography. Collaborative approaches, in which archaeologists work with local elders, linguists, and stewards of the land, can turn discovery into shared heritage rather than spectacle. Conservation matters as well. The Rio Plátano Biosphere Reserve is ecologically rich and vulnerable. As roads expand and economic pressures grow, the threat to both biodiversity and cultural heritage increases. What is discovered in the jungle is not only a window into the past, it is also a responsibility for the present.
Many questions remain. Who lived here? What languages did they speak? How did their social, economic, and ritual lives compare with more famous neighbors like the Maya? How and why were these sites abandoned? Radiocarbon dating, careful stratigraphic excavation, botanical and zooarchaeological analyses will be essential. And perhaps most importantly, how can study proceed ethically with Honduran institutions and communities fully in the lead? The Lidar maps gave archaeologists a new kind of treasure map, but the centuries of hard, meticulous science, excavation, cataloging, publishing, still lie ahead. That work will tell whether the White City of legend maps to a single great urban center, or whether legend gathered across a landscape of multiple, interconnected settlements.
Why do we chase lost cities? Part of it is the romance of discovery, the idea of overturning conventional histories and finding treasures. But there is a shadow side. Sensational narratives can misrepresent indigenous histories, harm local environments, and encourage illicit digging. The best storytelling does not shy away from complexity. It holds multiple truths: the myth, the archaeological data, the lived knowledge of local people, and the ecological stakes. If the White City teaches us anything, it is this: discoveries belong to communities and to science together. They are invitations to listen, to learn, and to protect. The jungle keeps secrets, and sometimes it gives them up slowly, reluctantly, on its own terms. In the age of lasers and satellites, the ground below the canopy is no longer invisible. We can now see the faint signatures of lives lived long ago, plazas that once echoed with footsteps, pyramids where rituals were offered, stones carved with meaning now nearly forgotten. But seeing is only the first step. To turn sight into knowledge requires care, collaboration, and humility. If we approach the Mosquitia with respect for its people, its wildlife, and its buried histories, the story of the White City may yet become a story worth celebrating, one of shared discovery, protection, and a deeper understanding of the many ways humans make place. Some places are lost only to those who refuse to look closely. The jungle never truly forgets. It waits. And when we learn to listen, patiently, respectfully, it will tell us what it has always known.